Hi everyone, welcome to the 10th episode of Operator Hindsight. And not gonna lie, we are sort of walking into a brand new era of Archetypes starting from this one. So here it is, the operator that started this narrative, Degenbrecher. Degenbrecher is a 6-star Swarm Master in the Guard class. Trait of the archetype, normal attacks deal damage twice, which is pretty cool if you think about it. For a lot of operators, that's something written in their skills, but for them, it's in the trait. But to better put that into perspective, here's more in-depth analysis. Again, if we look at the comparison across all guard archetypes, we'll find out that they don't come with very big numbers. In fact, most of their stats build are below average in the class, most notably on attack stats. So that's the trade-off that comes with the being able to deal damage twice thing in one attack. To low defense or no defense enemies, Swarm Masters destroy them really fast, but they also fall really fast against enemies climbing defense. Despite dealing 2 instances of damage in each attack, they will only gain 1 SP for offensive recovery skills. Next thing about Swarm Masters is that if you look in-game, all of them has attack nuker. The design of the archetype skills revolves around dealing burst damage, which means high damage in a short period of time. All of their skills are under 5 seconds, usually the duration is not even given. These skills have very high attack scales, but no attack modifiers. To put that into context, there's no attack plus certain percent, but rather all of them are deal certain percentage of attack as damage. And all of their skills are offensive recovery. Well, spoiler alert, used to be. Last thing last, high attack scales with no attack modifiers means they are naturally very good with attack buffs. I believe most of you have seen or even tried something like Warframe skill 2 plus Chance skill 3 or the buff Army Tachanka. That also applies to Degenbrecher as well. Next, let's dive into her talents. Talent 1, when dealing damage, has a 10% chance to increase attack to 160%, 165% at potential 3, and frightens the target for 5 seconds. Introducing Frighten, which is currently exclusive to Degenbrecher, pretty much a watered down version of her ability as a boss in Break the Ice. It's a crowd control effect that prevents enemies from auto-attacking when they are blocked, and it is still quite powerful. Part of the reason that makes it competitive with other hot CCs is that there are currently only less than a handful of enemies who are immune to Frighten, and most of them can be blocked to start with anyways. So most enemies, including bosses, can be locked down by Frighten. Degen does not need to block the enemy herself for Frighten to take effect, so it is also okay to stand at the side of the block unit for some extra room of error. The duration refreshes when it's triggered again, so that's a relayable CC like stun and bind. That's another plus, but like the description says, it's only limiting enemies' auto attacks. Their skills are not limited. More to come in the next page. Note that the Frighten CC and attack increase are 2 effects in one package, but not linked, so even if the enemy is immune to Frighten, the crit hit will still happen. And contrary to the description, Degenbrecher does not need to deal damage for Frighten to occur. Enemies can block or dodge the damage, but they will still get Frightened, so that's a nice surprise there. Frighten at its current state is a powerful crowd control. You can interrupt enemies' auto-attack startup animation if it triggers midway. Enemies not attacking is also a way to survive as well, right? Statistically, each auto attack has a 19% chance to apply Frighten since she hit twice. And just by Degen attacking non-stop, an enemy is estimated to be in Frighten 55.4% of the time, which is decent coverage. That goes up even higher when she's got attack speed buffs. This CC is very effective against enemies without skills, or those with skills that require auto attacks to build up, or skills that increase auto attack damage, or attack recovery skills, so it's more versatile than it may seem. On the other hand, of course, it's weak against enemies that can be blocked, or those that just work around their skills. And that's just the CC side of things. Don't forget it also comes with a crit hit attack scale, and it multiplies with all those in her skills, building up for big damage and buff potential. The talent is also guaranteed to trigger with skill 2 and skill 3, which is simply insane. Talent 2, when attacking a frightened target, ignores 25% of their defense, 30% at potential 5. So Talent 1 and 2 goes hand in hand. The defense ignore is immediately effective on the same hit that triggers frighten. This talent set has defined most of Degen's power. Talent 1 ensures that she deals big damage, aside from that serving as a CC provider, and Talent 2 ensures that her high DPH can also penetrate high defense enemies. Again, that's what we call high quality damage. We talked about Sword Masters falling to defense fast, and this talent helps with that. But at the end of the day, same for all Sword Masters, it's the skills that matter. So the only downside I can say about this talent is that it's effectively nothing against enemies with immunity to Frighten, which there are less than 10. Degen lands with the Sword Master X module. Base effect increases skill damage by 10%, calculated after defense like Fragile. Upgrades increase the crit damage scale by 10%, 5% by each level. So for base, even though it's post defense, it still adds a lot to her damage potential being another multiplier. For upgrades, they obviously water down the attack attribute she gets with max HP and defense. For reference, Degen gets 50 attack while Irene gets 65 and Chen gets 80 and 85 with her 2 modules. It also does not increase the Frighten and crit hit chance, which honestly makes sense because skill 2 and skill 3 make it 100% anyways, so this is purely a damage module, nothing else. Level 1 gives about 15.4% of damage increase and up to 24.9% with level 3. She's a very solid damage dealer, and for the full damage potential, I would definitely recommend level 3. And Module Y is likely not as effective as this one because Degen already has the talent that can dilute the Module Y base effect of ignoring defense. You can refer to my earlier module review video for detailed explanation, link in the description. Now let's talk about her skills. Mastery priority 3/2/1. Skill 3 is the kind of skills that if you don't master it, it's a crime. Her dominant skill deletes most enemies in one go. Skill 2 is the typical Sword Master's short cycle skill 2, mostly used in IS when you have the relics that let you spam it, or to pull up some perma store in harder contents. Skill 1 is the typical AFK skill, but there's just no reason to use it, simply because the other two are just too good to pass. Skill 1, the next attack deals 220% of the attack as physical damage twice to up to 5 surrounding ground enemies. This is a 0/3 attack recovery power strike design skill. The range is the same as Mudrock skill 2, and in terms of statistics and stuff, from skill cycle to target count to damage, it's no doubt the best Sword Master skill 1. But for AFK, you've got tons of other choices, and for using Degen, this is the only skill that does not guarantee Frighten trigger, so won't recommend this over skill 2 and 3, but Mastery does reduce the SP cost from 5 to 3, which is pretty big. Next we have skill 2, launches 2 slashes to up to 6 ground enemies in range. Blocked enemies, as long as they are being blocked by someone, are slashed 3 times instead. Talent 1 trigger rate increased to 100% and each slash deals 310% of attack as physical damage. This is a 10/12 attack recovery manual trigger skill with a max stack of 2. Degen deals 13k burst damage to a block target, which is quite crazy. As you can see, Mastery only increases target count, damage, and initial SP, but not the 12 SP requirement. However, if we do not consider attack recovery related buffs, skill 2 is inferior to skill 3 in terms of total damage and cycle DPS. So the application for skill 2 is quite clear. It's for perma store with Frighten. This can be relatively easily achieved by attack speed buffs, attack recovery buffs that are commonly found in integrated strategy. In daily if you wish, there are now also multiple ways to get SP for attack recovery skills like Liscom Battery, Chen Talent, Stainless Skill 2, and the Sway Sibling Talent, which is coming soon. Some of them, for example like Liscom Battery, are legit strategies that can be pulled off in harder contents like CC. Therefore, overall, the skill has potential to serve as a frighten tool, but it's not very relevant for most players. From my personal experience, the only times I use skill 2 over skill 3 is when I have a lot of attack recovery buffs and I can spam the skill like it's skill 1. Second is when I haven't had the E2 deny S, and that's pretty much it. And since masteries do not reduce the SP requirement, you're pretty safe to use it at level 7 if you want to try the permastall. Skill 3 continuously launches up to 10 slashes, each dealing 235% of attack as physical damage to up to 6 enemies in a Texas skill 2 range. Talent 1 trigger rate again increases to 100% and continuously drag enemies towards Degen moderately, then deals 330% of attack as physical damage to finish up and drags them towards her significantly. This is a 20/30 auto recovery. Yes, you heard me right. This is the one and only auto recovery skill in Swarm Master history. The skill deals a total of 39k damage over a 5-second window with a DPH of 3.1k to 4.3k. Combining with her defense ignore, she has no problem dealing with 99% of enemies in the game. Let's dive into the mechanics. First, the consecutive slashes. She launches one slash about every 0.3 seconds. In the meantime, drags enemy in every 1 second for a total of 3 times. So, slashing and dragging are 2 actions that happen in parallel. Also, Degenbrecher gains invincible, which means that she can be selected as a target and take no damage, and becomes immune to freeze and stun. Therefore, it's unlike Irene, who doesn't get any, and also unlike Chen, who also stops blocking within the cast. However, much like Yato's skill 2, the freeze and stun that Degen gets during this phase does not just go away, they are delayed until the end of this phase. Thus, when we look back at the final slash, which is another phase, Degen no longer has the set immunities, so if freeze and stun happened in the last phase, the final slash will be interrupted, along with the final drag, which is now linked to it instead of a parallel action. The full damage is dispensed over 3.8 seconds with a 1.2 second recovery, so you can take it as the skill has a 5-second duration, so one full cycle is 35 seconds. Now, this is truly the next generation of Swarm Master Skill 3. Number 1, this is the first and only Swarm Master skill out of all 15 of them to be auto recovery. Now, I'm not saying attack recovery is definitely inferior, but big perk of being auto recovery is that it brings flexibility. When the enemy is too much for Degen to handle herself, you can resort to putting her behind a shield, and knowing that skill 3 is a delete button, you just wait until the skill is up instead of having to pick up enemies. Buffs like skill aura also becomes beneficial. Next is the dragging. It helps to keep lighter enemies in range even when they tend to die in just a few slashes. For wave 3 enemies, the drag can still slow them by creating a stumbling effect. That also includes aerial units that are not immune to shifting. Overall, this mechanism makes sense, dragging enemies into block units so that Frighten takes effect. That's especially applicable for ranged enemies. Last but not least, high DPH from multiple attack and damage scales, plus the defense ignore from guaranteed Frighten trigger makes up for high quality damage. This is a graph that showcases the Swarm Master Skill 3's total damage numbers versus enemy defense, and Degen Skill 3 maintains 67.5% of the total damage facing enemies with up to 1500 defense. Irene does have a 50% defense ignore, which is higher, but it gets weaker with heavy enemy due to halved off levitate duration, not to mention that Degen's skill 3 base damage, target count are just one step ahead of both of these previous skill 3s. Last thing about skill 3, which we briefly touch on, is its buff potential. There's a rule in Archetypes that buffs are a seller's market. Buffs are limited, but damage skills are vast. Buffs tend to go to the skills that are good currently. We've went through the era of Axia skill 3, Chen skill 3, and Degen skill 3 is now in the spotlight. No inherent attack modifier, but a lot of attack and damage scales, no dilution. Warfarin skill 2, attack plus 90%, so total damage straight up plus 90%. Same goes for Stainless skill 1, but their cycles are harder to match up. Or for daily low step clears, you just put Degen inside of Sculptor skill 2, and that's automatically 38% more damage. If you wish, using any two of these, you can easily make Degenbrecher deal 100k damage in under 5 seconds. In my opinion, buffing Degenbrecher is probably one of the most practical and applicable combos right now. There really isn't much that can survive a nuclear button that deals big burst damage to 6 enemies in a fairly big range while ignoring 1/3 of their defense. It's also auto recovery, manual trigger, so very easy to time. Buffing nukers can bypass a lot of mechanics of bosses, for example those with skills that only trigger at a certain HP threshold. You can delete them when they're stuck in other animations where they can't react in time to cast those skills. For example, the Matsi kidnapping your operator, or the Steam Knight in his triple hit startup animation. It also applies to enemy with damage reduction or dodge that gets nullified by mechanics for a short period of time. For example, Manfred in chapter 10, Docario in chapter 13, and Dolly in the last summer event. You can simply buff Degen and brute force your way through. In conclusion, the strength of Degenbrecher lies in two aspects. One is of course her damage capability. This is the new ceiling for nuker skills. Short cycle, high burst damage. You can easily buff the damage to 2-fold or even 3-fold without extensive setups. It also comes with a 30% defense ignore that ensures the damage quality, making her excel not only in daily but also in buff game modes like IS and debuff game modes like CC. The other part of her power is the Frighten crowd control. It's a crowd control that most enemies don't have immunity to, which is effective. It's also easy to apply, relatively easy to lock down at least one target. Since it can be triggered by any damage, attack speed buffs and SP recovery buffs, regardless of attack or auto recovery, they all translate into higher Frighten coverage. For performances in future events, obviously like I said, Degen is basically a delete button in daily contents. Just make sure you have the anti-air to cover off skill, and nothing much will go wrong. She's one of the most reliable starters for IS4 after expansion 2. Not only that, she remains very impactful throughout the run. A lot of relics works wonders for her as well. The SP recovery ones allow her to spam skills for damage or frighten, and damage relics will make her numbers skyrocket. Don't forget, the ending 3 boss is also one of those damage window design bosses that we just talked about. She can harvest resources pretty efficiently in RA and has also seen impactful performance in CCB Underdawn, despite it being a relatively unfriendly CC to melee units. In summary, Degenbrecher is a 6-star next-gen Swarm Master with designs, mechanics, and statistics that have shown advantages in practice over the predecessors. High quality damage and the widely effective, easy to apply Frighten crowd control are the two of her key strengths. For daily, my rating for her is 8. You can easily put her in your standard 12-op team, go in blind, and you can be sure that she will get something done. Skill 3 is an auto recovery manual skill that is easy to time, fast as cycling, so you can have her at the front, on the side, or even behind the defender depending on the situation. Beyond that, you can buff her to deal with tougher enemies in potentially one go, skipping various mechanics, and other than attack buffs, attack speed and SP recovery related buffs are also in her favor for either more damage or higher Frighten coverage. For advanced, I would also rate her at 8. Her defense ignore and high DPH makes sure that she isn't as heavily crippled by attack debuffs or enemies defense buffs like with some damage dealers, and even when it does, she can still count on her Frighten talent and transition into a CC provider in a store strategy. Yes, it's a softer crowd control than freeze and stun, but in return the immunity isn't as widespread, so big potential in the future, and is being used in IS runs. Here are the rating preview for the upcoming operators. After we got past the Virtuosa Viviana banner, the graph has been rescaled. I have to say, it's not like operators like 左乐 and Alpianus is bad or anything. In fact, they are also very next-gen in some aspects, like Degenbrecher. Rather, what we are experiencing, in my opinion, is an overall shuffle of operator strength, with Arknights going into the 6th year of operation. So, under comparison, some of them may end up not as impactful, but from the whole 6-star operator spectrum, they are still very solid units. That's gonna do it for this episode. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.